Hi there, it's Matt here, and welcome back to the podcast. I want to start today with a thought experiment. Imagine you have a colleague, sharp, energetic, perpetually ahead of their inbox. You notice over time that they seem to arrive earlier than everyone else and leave later. You assume they're burning the candle at both ends, sacrificing sleep for productivity. And then, one day, they tell you they go to bed at midnight and wake up without an alarm at 5 a.m, not because they have to, because that is simply when they are done sleeping. You would probably assume they were lying, or deluded, or both, because the science is unambiguous on this, that a person sleeping 5 hours a night is a person running a biological deficit. You have read the studies. You know what chronic sleep restriction does to the cardiovascular system, to the immune system, to the architecture of memory. You know that the body cannot simply decide that it needs less sleep the way it might decide it needs less coffee. Sleep is not optional. Sleep is not a lifestyle choice. Sleep is a biological imperative, as non-negotiable as breathing. And yet, what if that colleague was not lying? What if they were not deluded? What if, written somewhere in the 3 billion letters of their genetic code, there was a single instruction, a single altered character in a single gene that genuinely biologically allowed them to accomplish in 5 hours what your brain requires 8 hours to complete? That is not a hypothetical. That person exists. In fact, somewhere between 1% and 3% of the human population are versions of that person. And the story of how scientists found them and what they found inside them is one of the most extraordinary chapters in modern sleep science. Let's start at the beginning. For most of human history, the person who claimed to need very little sleep was regarded with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. Part of us wanted to believe it was true, that exceptional people were simply wired differently, burning brighter, needing less recovery time. Another part of us suspected it was performance, the bragging of the chronically exhausted dressed up as a superpower. Science, for a long time, sided with the skeptics. The emerging consensus through the late 20th century was clear. Adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep, full stop. The person sleeping 5 hours was not thriving. They were depleting. They had simply normalized the depletion. Here is the problem with that consensus. It was correct for roughly 97% of the population. But science that is correct 97% of the time still has to account for the other 3%. And in 2009, a team of researchers at the University of California, San Francisco, found the first piece of molecular evidence that the other 3% were playing an entirely different biological game. The story begins with a mother and a daughter. Both women slept about 6.25 hours a night. Both woke naturally without alarms. Both functioned without complaint. No fatigue, no cognitive fog, no yearning for the weekend lie-in. They were, by every behavioral measure, fine. The question was why, and the answer was the gene, called DEC2. In the mother and daughter, this specific gene had a single altered letter, a mutation that changed one amino acid in the resulting protein. To prove it was the mutation driving the short sleep, and not merely a coincidence, the researchers introduced the same mutation into mice and fruit flies. Both animals slept less. Both needed less recovery time after being kept awake artificially. The experiment had turned a genetic observation into a causal mechanism. The discovery made headlines. It was the first time anyone had found a specific molecular basis for natural short sleep. But the scientists knew it was only the beginning of the story. Sleep is not a simple system. It is more like a symphony than a switch. Dozens of instruments, dozens of players, each contributing to an outcome that only works when everything is playing together. If one mutation in one gene could reshape the symphony, others almost certainly could too. It took roughly 10 more years to find the next one.
So for, it must be at least a decade now, I have been an avid, probably more like rabid consumer of protein shakes. But the hard thing, honestly, in the supplement space, if you really understand and do your diligence, is this critical thing called trust. It is very hard to find a brand that you can truly trust. That's when I came across the company Puri and the really impressive founder. Even though I'm sure it makes them less profit versus other quick and loose companies, Puri takes quality more seriously than any company I've ever seen before. They have so many offerings, protein powders galore, but lots of other additions. But that's what I was focusing on here. Why did I choose them? Well, it's really for 4 specific reasons. Number 1, they are free from hormones. Number 2, they are free from GMOs. Number 3, they are free of any pesticides. And number 4, and this is the critical confidence part, every single batch is third-party tested for over 200 harmful contaminants, things like heavy metals, etc. All you have to do if you are a neurotic nerd like me, you can even scan the QRI code on the back of the product to get the third-party independent laboratory test results. That's how much trust and confidence they place in their product. By the way, if you want a recommendation, go for the dark chocolate flavored protein powder. It's just exceptional. In fact, it's wonderfully addictive. I didn't just say that. Anyway, it delivers 21 grams of protein per serving. And for folks of my podcast right now, you can save 20%. So go over to puri.com/Matt Walker, and that is spelled PUORI.com, Matt Walker. So again, that is PUORI.com/Matt Walker, and you will get 20% off your product.
In 2019, 2 separate discoveries arrived almost simultaneously from the same laboratory. The first involved a gene called ADRB1. A family spanning 3 generations had been identified, none of them carrying the previously mentioned DEC2 mutation, all of them sleeping around 6 hours a night without any apparent consequence. Genetic testing narrowed the cause to a single-letter mutation in ADRB1, a change that made a specific population of neurons in the brainstem substantially more excitable. The neurons in question live in a region called the dorsal pons, and they are, under normal circumstances, wakened rapid eye movement specialists. They fire during wakefulness, they fire during dreaming, and they go quiet during the deep, slow wave phases of non-rapid eye movement sleep. In people carrying this mutation, those neurons are easier to trigger, quicker to activate, more biased toward the awake state. When researchers used light to stimulate these cells in sleeping mice carrying the mutation, the animals woke up immediately. The implication was elegant. The mutation had not broken anything. It had simply recalibrated the brain's default preference, tilting the ratio of wakefulness toward a slightly different equilibrium. The second discovery in 2019 involved a gene called NPSR1 and a father and son who slept 5.5 and 4.3 hours a night, respectively. The NPSR1 gene encodes a receptor for a signaling molecule called neuropeptide S, which promotes arousal. The mutation found in this family made the receptor more sensitive, easier to activate, more effective at switching on downstream wakefulness pathways. In mice carrying the equivalent mutation, the effect was predictable: less sleep, more activity. But there was something else happening that nobody had quite anticipated. When researchers subjected these mutant mice to sleep deprivation and then tested their memories, the mice remembered. Normal mice, sleep deprived by the same amount, showed the expected memory impairment, the same phenomenon that makes a sleepless night before an exam so reliably catastrophic for human recall. The mutant mice were, by some mechanism not yet fully understood, protected against that impairment. They slept less, and yet their brains consolidated memories as though they had slept normally. Let me say that again because it is worth sitting with. A single genetic mutation, one altered letter in one gene, appeared to decouple sleep duration from one of sleep's most essential functions. The standard model says sleep is when the brain consolidates learning. Less sleep means less consolidation. These mice had less sleep and full consolidation anyway. A fourth gene, GRM1, added yet another molecular pathway to the picture. Two unrelated families, two different mutations, both producing short sleep, this time acting through the brain's glutamate signaling system. The effect in human carriers was substantial, around 100 minutes less sleep per night, though mouse models showed a more modest reduction. Before we get to the health question, the one that is probably forming at the back of your mind right now, I want to dwell for a moment on what these experiments mean for our understanding of sleep architecture itself. Because the standard model of sleep, the one most of us carry around implicitly, treats sleep as a uniform resource. More is better, less is worse. It is additive, like water in a tank. But what the natural short sleeper mutations reveal is that sleep is not a tank. It is a process, a set of biological operations running in parallel, each with its own time requirements, its own molecular machinery, its own relationship to the genes of the individual running them. And in some individuals, that machinery has been tuned through random mutation, through natural selection's indifferent tinkering, to run faster. Think about what happens when you compress a video file. The goal is not to lose information. It is to represent the same information more efficiently using smarter encoding. The natural short sleeper mutations look from the outside like compression, the same restorative work, the same memory consolidation, the same immune maintenance accomplished in fewer hours by a brain that has, through genetic accident, found a more efficient encoding. Now, this is speculative. The scientists studying this field are careful to say so, but it is the kind of speculation that the evidence invites. When the DEC2 mutation introduced into fruit flies does not merely shorten their sleep, but extends their lifespan. When animals carrying that mutation live longer, show better metabolic function, demonstrate greater resilience to stress. The question stops being simply, why do these individuals need less sleep? And starts being, what is the mutation actually switching on? This next study sharpens the picture further. When researchers compared two fraternal twins, one carrying a DEC2-related variant, one not, under conditions of sleep deprivation, the carrier outperformed their twin on tests of sustained attention and cognitive speed. Not by a little, not in a way that could be attributed to motivation or caffeine or practiced stoicism. The biological difference tracked the genetic difference cleanly and repeatedly. The mutation was not helping this twin endure sleep loss. It was helping them not need as much sleep to begin with. And on the sleep they did get, they appeared to extract more value. A partner of today's podcast is the wellness company Pique, spelled Pique. The Radiant Skin Duo represents what I find appealing about their approach: science-backed ingredients in bioavailable forms. This is a two-part system, Sun Goddess Matcha and BT Fountain, designed to support skin health from within rather than topically. The biochemistry is straightforward. Antioxidants from the matcha help manage oxidative stress and inflammatory responses, while the beauty electrolyte provides structural support through ceramides and hyaluronic acid. We know that skin hydration affects the extracellular matrix and that proper hydration supports cellular function. The system also provides calm energy without disrupting cortisol rhythms, relevant for those of us who monitor our daily energy patterns carefully. How I use it: matcha at 10:30 a.m., BT Fountain mid-afternoon. The BT Fountain mixes into water with a pleasant yuzu raspberry taste. Light, not overly sweet. After consistent use for about 15 days, the energy from the matcha is sustained without jitteriness, which matters for maintaining focus during long research sessions. You can get 20% off for life, plus a complimentary gift at peaklife.com/Matt Walker. Here is the question you are probably asking by now. These people sleep 4, 5, 6 hours a night, year after year, decade after decade. Even if they feel fine, even if they function well, are they actually fine? Is there a hidden cost, a slow accumulation of biological damage that simply has not surfaced yet? It is the right question. And the honest answer to the scientists who study this field is, based on what we currently know, these individuals appear to be genuinely fine. The literature on natural short sleepers is consistent on this point. Researchers examining these families, tracking their health, their cognitive function, their physiological markers, have not found the signatures of harm that attend sleep deprivation in ordinary people. No elevated blood pressure, no metabolic disruption, no immune impairment. The adverse consequences of short sleep, it turns out, are not consequences of sleeping briefly per se. They are consequences of sleeping briefly when your biology is configured to require more. Think of it this way. If you drain a swimming pool designed to hold 1 million liters down to 500,000, you have a problem. The filtration system cannot function properly, the chemistry goes wrong, the whole ecosystem becomes hostile. But if the pool was engineered from the start to operate at 500,000 liters, it works perfectly. The volume is not the issue. The mismatch between volume and design is the issue. For the approximately 1/3 of American adults who sleep less than the recommended 7 hours, the mismatch is the problem. Their biology was built for 8 or 7.5, and they are running it at 6. The consequences are real and documented and serious. But for the rare few whose biology was built for 6, the system operates exactly as designed. I want to pause here for a moment to give you a sense of the scale we are talking about. When researchers estimate that natural short sleepers represent somewhere between 1 and 3% of the general population, they are describing an extraordinarily small group. The DEC2 mutation, the first one discovered, the most studied, appears in roughly 1 in every 1,000 people. The NPSR1 mutation is far rarer still. These are not common variants. They are not polymorphisms that nudge the population distribution of sleep duration by a few minutes. They are single-letter spelling errors in the genome, rare, specific, and enormously consequential for the individuals who carry them. Now, hold that against the fact that 1/3 of American adults report sleeping fewer than 7 hours a night. 1/3. That is approximately 100 million people in the United States alone, most nights, not getting enough sleep. They are not natural short sleepers. They are ordinary sleepers running an extraordinary deficit. This is the confusion that haunts the public conversation about sleep. We hear stories about executives who sleep 5 hours. We hear about historical figures who apparently thrived on next to nothing. And we absorb the dangerous lesson that perhaps sleep is optional for exceptional people, that willpower and drive can simply override the need. The science says otherwise. The science says that for nearly everyone, that belief is not a sign of exceptionalism. It is a symptom of the deprivation itself, the impaired self-assessment, the blunted metacognition, the inability to accurately perceive how impaired you are because the impairment has degraded your very ability to perceive it. But here is where the story earns its place in the conversation. The science also says that the rare few who genuinely do not need as much sleep are not lying, are not deluded, and are not exceptional in the motivational sense. They are exceptional in the molecular sense. The difference between them and the sleep-deprived executive who insists 5 hours is enough is the difference between someone born with a metabolic mutation that allows them to run a caloric deficit without consequence, and someone who is simply starving themselves and has convinced themselves they feel fine. One is a biological reality. The other is a dangerous illusion. Knowing the difference matters. We have spent decades learning how bad insufficient sleep is. We are continuing to learn what sufficient sleep actually does. And the people who have been quietly thriving on 5 hours their whole lives, dismissed, doubted, occasionally celebrated, may turn out to be the most important research subjects in the history of sleep science. The rarest exceptions, it turns out, have a way of illuminating everything else. So that's the science behind natural short sleepers, or people who are genetically wired to sleep less than the average person. I hope you enjoyed the episode and learned something along the way. No need for reviews or a like. All I ask is that you share the podcast with other people. That makes such a big difference. And with that, I'll bid you a good night. Take care for now, and I'll see you in the next episode.